Hello, WonderCon. Welcome to this panel. I'm so excited to get started in this conversation and talk about decades first, as most of you have done recent projects where you're working on a specific decade and molding your work to fit that era. Justi, let's start off with you. With contemporary work, can you walk us through your work for Storm Reed's wig for her character in Missing? What considerations did you take in when styling it to fit her character's personality and the original look for the reshoot process?
That's a pretty big question, right? Right? Let me see if I can remember what the question was. I'm going to tell you what I did. Actually, I came to the party late on this film, Missing. I came in as a department head for the second unit and some reshoots. Sometimes we changed the whole film, or not the whole film, but a great part of it. And there were some pieces added to this film that were actually crucial to the outcome of it. So that took place. So right away I had something to work with. You know, there were some things that were in place already, but there were gonna have to be more pieces. And it had been some time since the project had begun, so that's better. Some changes had occurred, you know. The actors went on to other projects, so pieces had to be made. And you know, something about a reshoot, that there is an art and a beauty when you get to create everything from scratch, but there's also an art and beauty in recreating something that has always been recreated, already have been created. And there is a certain satisfaction when you nail it, you know? It is. So what happened with the Storm Reed wig was a little different. You know, most of the time before a project takes place, I go into a production meeting and I talk to the actor, I talk to, you know, the production team, and we figure out that character. But in this case, a character was already established. And so I had some little bits and pieces of things, like I said, to help, but I also had to create new pieces. The fun fact about this particular project was that when Storm showed up for shooting that day, she already had braids. Now, I don't know if anyone knows about wigs at all, but it's really important that you're able to make the surface as flat as possible in order to install the wig. So that was like one of those things that just happened, you know? So 2 hours later, a few snitches and, you know, a few snips here and a snip there, I was able to get that wig on, and we were able to get her there and start matching that scene. And it was a lot of fun. You know, it's so much that goes into making wigs, it would be really difficult to sum it up.
How long did it take to create that wig for her?
Well, in this case, I didn't have a lot of time. I was creating 2 wigs. And so it takes about a month generally to do something like that. I mean, or a month or 2, depending on what it is. But in this case, we had to turn that around in 3 weeks.
Oh my gosh. I was thinking like 1 or 2 days. No.
No, 3 weeks. Yeah, but you know, you could turn something around in a couple of days, but not that.
Yeah.
No, you want it to be high quality. And one thing about wigs is that it takes some time to get materials. You know, because all of the materials we use are from another country. And so, you know, if you have vendors, they're shipping you things, there's customs, there's so many things that have to take place in order to actually get the materials. So it takes a minute. So you need a little bit of space in there.
Yeah. Now, the Doom Patrol episode, titled Nostalgia Patrol, features various different movie genres due to the team getting trapped in movies the character Rita starred in. Because of this, each genre of movie we see in the show has set its own unique costumes. Carrie, can you talk to us about the process of designing costumes for each genre?
First off, though, I just want to say that whole synchronicity thing that Justi was just talking about with Storm showing up with her hair ready, those moments are so important in production, especially like for me in TV, because it goes so fast. We called them Doom Miracles on Doom Patrol, and they did happen on a regular enough basis that we had a name for them. But as for that episode, yes, we had a lot of, we had period costumes throughout Doom Patrol. Every episode pretty much had a period costume, or like a big scene of period costumes. It didn't seem like a period show, but it kind of was. And in this particular episode, we were looking at films from a period of time. And even more so, we're looking at, in the one that was The Haunting of White Manor, it was a film that was based on a real film from the 60s called The Innocents, which was set in Victorian times. So then you're looking at a costume where you're looking at having a Victorian costume through the eyes of a 1960s filmmaker. And so, everything starts with research, but that was really like the additional level, the nuance of the research. And then, for example, in Secret Rendezvous, the first movie that we see of Rita's, that's based on the Philadelphia story. We stuck pretty close to what the look of that film was, but we made a couple changes, one of those being that Rita would be in a tennis outfit. And what I love about the research we get to do is the writers, they work with us and they come up with these great ideas and these nuances where it's like, I'm not just looking up the research for tennis from 30s, 40s, I'm looking up tennis wear for a country club gal, rather than like, as opposed to tennis wear for a competitive athletic tennis person, So it's those little things that we get to do. And then finally with the sci-fi episode, the research there was the 50s and the 60s sci-fi. It was Forbidden Planet and Barbarella and Star Trek. We actually were going to lean more into the Barbarella aspect, but as some of you may know, April Bowlby, who plays Rita, was pregnant during our final season, and so I had to work around that. And Barbarella was not going to work on her body. So we had to deal with a little bit of finessing that, but the fun part about that one is also I didn't normally work on Robot Man or Negative Man. That came from the super suits department because there were mechanics and electronics, as well as Cyborg was out of my, we were divided between super suits and the costume department. And it really depended on what, if there were mechanics, if there was some mitigating factor that was a little extra. But there were times when we'd cross over, and that was one of those where I got to, work with the Super Suits team in Atlanta to create Robot Man and Negative Man's look to make it all cohesive with what Jane and Rita wore. So that's about it. Thanks.
Nice. Now, 1970s makeup and fashion were all about a more relaxed and bohemian style. Rebecca, how did you approach recreating the 1970s style for Daisy Jones and the Six?
Well, the show is based on a book by Taylor Jenkins Reid. So I read the book, and I think it was really important to maintain the integrity of the characters, because fans, I think that's important for fans, and the show in general. So I also want it to be authentic and not feel like a caricature piece of the 70s, but feel raw and real. It's like rock stars, Laurel Canyon, hippie kind of vibe. So there needed to be shine, there needed to be imperfections in the makeup. Not everybody is perfect. There's 12 main cast. I did a lot of research on the era as far as documentaries and deep dives on Google. And when I saw the sorry, I'm jumping around a little bit, but when I saw the who was cast with who the character was, then you kind of put it together. And what's really fun is, when you read a book, you kind of envision what the characters are in your head, and to be able to bring that to life, it was really fun. And I made boards for the 12 characters and their progression, because some of them start in the mid-60s, they go through the 70s, and then there's some 80s pops, and then there's age makeups in the 90s. So Amazon and Hello Sunshine wanted to see the progression of all of the 12 characters for the entire show on boards. So I did all of that and broke down like who was getting sideburns at what point, or he was getting a mustache. And Warren really had to have a mustache, and I fought hard for that because he had it in the book, so it was something that they had to have. And we tried many different styles of mustaches on him until we found the winner. And RJ, who's here in the front row, he applied it, and
Do you ever do that with like Photoshop first, or is it always a physical mustache you're putting on somebody?
we can do it with Photoshop. I actually did that with him to sell it, but with the original, like my original ideas, but it shifted a lot from that point from what it was originally. But also in the 70s, tattoos were not very popular. So, and now they are, and a lot of actors have a lot of tattoos. So you watch the show and everybody looks, it's like, oh, it's an easy makeup show. Nobody's really wearing anything, but to get to that point takes a lot of work because you have to get them to a clean slate. So like Riley, who plays Daisy, has 8 tattoos, and she's really fair-skinned, so I'd cover all her tattoos. Oh, wow. I would do body makeup from the neck down. Wow. I did like many layering of cream, like blushes and bronzers and things to give her kind of a natural skin tone and glowing look. And Sebastian, who played Warren, the drummer, who I was talking about with the mustache, he had, how many tattoos did he have, RJ? He had 9 tattoos. And they like to put him with no shirt on and vest because he's a drummer. So, so they would, it was like, I don't know, 45 minutes to an hour in makeup total to get all his tattoos covered, body makeup, put the mustache on, get him set to look like he's just natural.
Oh my God.
But yeah, so it was a lot, and that was just the main cast, and then we did so many age makeups tests to find the right looks that wouldn't be distracting as you're coming in and out of the show, because it flashes from the documentary to the past, and you don't want it to be jarring when you're watching that. So it was a lot of fine-tuning to get it to where it was.
Wow. Well, I guess that means me and my one Minnie Mouse tattoo are out of it. So there I go.
Wear big bracelets and everything.
Yeah. So now the work you all individually do plays into how the audience perceives the character, like you were talking about before, or the world the story is set in. So let's dissect that a little bit more. Jennifer, the Talon is one of Gotham's most epic villains, and in the comics he's known for his menacing appearance. How did you go about designing his costume for Gotham Knights?
Luckily, I had some source material to help with that. The Court of Owls run is one of my favorite comic book runs ever, and then also in the world of DC and Batman. And so getting to design the Talon was very exciting because he is so badass. I started with the comic book, and then also in conversations with our co-creators, and it was, we all knew what we wanted and didn't want, so that helped to start with the design process. The Talon comes from a very wealthy, large amount of people from Gotham, and they are funding both his costume and everything that he has, his weaponry, everything. So everything needs to be very sophisticated and extremely lethal. So with that in mind, there's also the other aspect of how old is he? Where did he come from? And the Talon, in the comic book series is technically very, very old, and it's something that we explore here in our show too. So while it's making him sophisticated and contemporary and extremely, lethal assassin, it's also incorporating time periods and a little bit of antiquities, and also then making him protective and carry all those blades that he needs to on his back. So it's taking a lot of those different elements and bringing it together to make him very stealthy, sleek, clean lines, but also hold the weaponry of his bandolier with all of his Talon knives that kind of end up in everyone. and so that it's both practical and also aesthetically pleasing. There's also a lot of gold elements to his costume. He, in the comics, is a reanimated human. And so something that I was kind of nodding to with his costume was that the gold in his costume is conductive, because metal is conductive. It is something that helps keep him going. So those are some of the fun things. And then the cape. He kills the Cape Crusader, so of course he's got to wear one.
Yeah, exactly. So Kevin Can F himself is such a unique show that it blends two formats, the multi-camera sitcom and the single-camera drama setup. James, what role does the set design play in telling the story of the show?
Yeah, so that's, what a unique show to get to design. I don't think anybody, besides the other person who designed this first season, I don't think anybody's really gotten to do both genres in one, or both formats in one show. And just a logistical thing, like when you're doing a normal drama show, you're building a set that looks like a room, essentially this room. It's got straight walls, ceilings, floors. When you're doing like a sitcom set where there's an audience, you have risers, and it's more like a theatrical production. The walls are kind of open. There's no ceiling. Usually the walls are taller. Everything's much more brightly lit. So that really kind of came to an interesting head on season 2. There's a character that usually only appears in the sitcom world, Neil, who's the sitcom star's best friend, and he literally gets smashed out of the sitcom world into the real world, our world, essentially, the drama world. And that really opened all these opportunities to see, like, what is everybody's life like outside of this rambunctious sitcom star. And for that character, we decided, like, his life was very sad. So every choice we made, it was, like, sad choices. And the show's characters are already kind of, like, a little rundown scenery. Nobody's, like, wealthy, and so to take that as your starting point and then go even sadder, it was like a lot of discussions about his furniture. For instance, there was a clip in the intro there of him sitting on this tiny little couch. We decided that all of his furniture, he didn't buy any of it. He found it on the street, or he stole it, or got it from his sister, who's his landlord, who lives downstairs. And the couch discussion with the director were saying, well, like, this is a personal story, but I briefly lived with these guys, just sublet, and it was very strange. In their living room, they didn't have a couch. They only had like 6 recliners, and I was like, why don't you guys have a couch? And they're like, well, why would you want to sit next to somebody if you didn't have to? Yeah, 6 recliners, yeah. And so I thought, that'd be funny. What if we just like have this guy, he only has like recliners in his living room? And the director said, well, I don't know. Like, I was like, well, where does Kevin sit when he comes over? And he said, I don't think Kevin comes to his house. I don't think he has any friends. And I was like, oh. What if he just has one recliner? Like that's sort of like the kinds of choices you can make about a character to tell the story that he doesn't have a lot of friends. He doesn't really care about his environment. Ultimately, we had to go with the small little love seat because there's a sort of makeout session on it, and we just thought that might be too difficult to do on a recliner. But but he really played that couch a lot. There's a lot of scenes of him like slumping down into it, and it became sort of a really integral part of his character and his apartment. So yeah, there's ways you can tell story through somebody's scenery, and between seeing him as the happy-go-lucky guy in the 3-camera sitcom world to then what his real life looks like, it's like this illusion is shattered. So yeah.
I love that you were talking about the story behind the chairs, because I don't know if anyone realizes how many stories we have behind every decision we make. And they're things that like the viewer will never know. Sometimes the writers don't even know what we did in our own head to make a story of why the character is wearing or lives in or does to their hair and makeup. But there are so many stories. And I think background is one of the most fun place to play with that, because every single extra, every single background performer, I want to see them each be a specific human being. I think it makes for a richer experience of watching it. It's a lot of fun that way. So
I absolutely love giving them a backstory. Just recently, I was doing something, and it was a funeral scene, and we said, we were happy that that guy was dead. That was the backstory. Love a good backstory.
And that's perfect to segue right into background characters. I mean, they're just as important to telling the story as the main cast is. Rebecca, for Daisy Jones and the Six, which has lots of scenes with crowded venues, for example, how did you approach the makeup design for the background characters?
We would have the background. So the background comes in for costume fittings, usually like a few days or something before they work. And we would also do hair and makeup fittings and ask the men to not shave. And we would shape their facial hair. We would go through, and I mean, it was very detailed. I had boards on what the background should look like. The nails of the women had to be a specific shape, specific kind of color tones. He's shaking his head at me. And yeah, we'd have to cut nails down.
Wow.
But we had a couple other people that were kind of running that. I just give the boards to them, and then I said, this is the kind of what you need to follow as a guide, and then you just create that, because I feel like the background, if they don't look right, then it just throws everything off, but it could really sell the show. Also, with the main cast, sometimes you have to play it safe with facial hairstyles or looks, but you don't have to with background, and that can really sell an era, especially for the 70s when people had like big chops and crazy mustaches and stuff. So we would have a lot of that on our background, which I feel like really sells the 70s era more, where on a main cast member, they might want to like be a little safer and not have something that's that large on their face, like big chops. But yeah, so I think like that, and also the supporting cast is a huge part. And I tried to really do that on Daisy Jones. I mean, it's the same thing. The backstory and everything. I mean, I think things through way too much, and I have a whole story for everything in my head and the character. But I just thought it was really important for all our supporting cast to do the same thing. So the men, I would just have them as early as they were cast, like grow their facial hair out. They'd come in like a few days when they were probably doing their costume fitting, and we would shape their facial hair, go through their looks, and all of those I had to get approved. We'd take photos, I'd send my ideas. But that's important too, like just to have a variety and really sell the overall feel of the era.
Yeah, I'm not sure long orange nails would work in that era at all. So yeah, good point.
No, you have to think about it. I mean, and I think like sub-genres are important too. And in the 70s, like even if we're focused on these Laurel Canyon rock and roll kind of people, there's also other kinds of people. And I tried to bring that in when they're at Sound City, there's a girl who works at Sound City. And when I saw her and her hairstyle and just how she looks like she would pull off the early punk vibe. So I was like, I want her to have the black eyeliner rimmed around her eyes. She works at a music studio. We don't really see that with any of the other characters, but that's pulling in other things that were happening at that time.
Yeah. Now, there's a lot of prep that takes place behind the scenes to make sure actors look like who they're playing. Justi, how do you work with actors to incorporate their natural hair care routines into their character's appearance? What does that impact have on the overall look and feel of the project?
Well, first thing is that a happy, comfortable actor is gonna make everything happy for everybody else. So, yeah, that's a big deal. I mean, we all want to look good. We don't want to be out there looking some way that you don't feel represents yourself best or represent the character that you intend. And so natural hair care plays a part in that. And how it plays a part is that oftentimes natural hair is under the wig. Yeah, that's natural hair under there. And they got to go home with that. So it's important to use practices and to really work with the actor to figure out like what's their level of comfort. You know, I generally like to have a conversation, and particularly because I install wigs, people have had what I like to call wig trauma, bad installations, uncomfortable installations, and they don't have a therapist for that yet. So you know, it's really important that, you know, I find out what they don't want. You know, I like to start there. You know, what don't you like? Because, you know, I may have one person or one actress who wants a braid down, and then I might have another actress who's going to dinner after she's finished today. So lifestyle comes into play. And so it's important that I not only preserve their hair, and, you know, I like to have a saying, I like to leave it better than I came. I like to leave everything better than I came. So in that respect, if I can, you know, offer something that is gonna help nurture someone's hair, you know, I'm all in for that. And so what happens is when someone sees that the people involved take care and they care, it just makes better for everything. You know, at least it's all clear in the hair department, and that's definitely a good thing.
Yes, we love that.
Yes, a cool, peaceful, you know, hair trailer.
Yes. So we're going to jump over to Carrie and talk about The Boys. How did you work with the costume designer for the show, Laura Jean Shannon, to bring the costumes of characters like Homelander and Starlight to life?
Okay, well, so this is a long time ago now, because this was the season 1, right? But I started as LJ's, that's what I call Laura Jean Shannon, LJ. I started as her assistant costume designer, and had been working with her for a few years doing that. And we started working on the super suits far in advance of actually shooting the show. It was amazing to me how much time and money goes into developing these. You know, and how different every single super suit is. Every single one, you think you're going to learn something about it, and it's gonna inform the next one that you do, and it doesn't. It's just something totally, like, you're like, I didn't see that one coming. That wasn't on my bingo card. You know, so I mean, like, for example, Homelander, we had a life cast of the actor, that we had a mannequin, and then of both of the actors, and both of them required draping, where Starlight was like a straightforward drape of the costume onto the life form, the mannequin of the actor's body. Homelander's whole body, his muscles were sculpted onto his life form, his mannequin, and that was the suit. The actual costume was contoured, draped, and glued to the muscles, which Anthony Starr was delighted that he wouldn't have to actually get that body. He was really excited for his butt, and that he could still drink beer. But, you know, like, working with LJ for that, we had a thing where, like, the designer who was supposed to design, because we worked in this way where super suits, the 7 was one department, and again, like, the civilians and any day players are going to be the costume department. But the costume designer was still on Titans and couldn't move over. So I got this huge, scary opportunity to be the costume designer of the pilot. And, like, I'm a huge comic book fan. I was working in another country. I was scared to death. But, you know, I looked at it as an opportunity to, like, do right by the person who was mentoring me and just, like, give it my best shot. And, you know, it's really amazing. Like 3 seasons later, Butcher and Huey are still wearing their signature jackets that I designed, and that makes me feel so good. And, you know, all that, it's working with the actors, the director, the showrunner, you know, and the studio, and it can be a lot of cooks in the kitchen. And the fact that they still like that so much after all these years, it just, you know, whenever I feel like I doubt myself, I look at that and I'm like,
I love it.
Okay, maybe I know what I'm doing. And, you know, and then that led directly to Doom Patrol. I went straight from Vancouver to Atlanta to work on Doom Patrol. So, Yeah, I don't know if that answered that well, but it was, yeah.
That's awesome. So Jennifer, what was your design process for recreating the iconic Robin suit for Carrie Kelly in Gotham Knights?
So, Carrie Kelly, first of all, I mean, how awesome do we get to bring her to life? I mean, being the nerd that I am, super exciting. The process actually for me with our Carrie Kelly started before I even got the job. I was preparing for the interview for the job, and for interviews, you'll often do costume boards of inspiration, what you're thinking for each of the characters. And I'm type A and may have over-prepared to the point of when I was doing Carrie Kelly's board, I was like, I have so many ideas, but I want to make sure I'm clearly conveying them to the co-creators because she's so iconic to me, and how often do you get to design Robin? I just wanted to make sure I got it right, so I had to draw her. And so I just took to sketching Navia, the actress who plays Carrie Kelly. I started sketching her up, and then I started drawing some of my ideas for her. And it's really interesting that what she ends up on screen in is pretty close to my original start of the designs, whereas our Talon went through quite a few different phases. We had versions A through J for the Talon, and Carrie, she only got to 4 versions. And so it was one of those fun things where, okay, my gut instinct was what the co-creators wanted, but for her in designing her costume, while she's Batman's protege, Batman's dead. She doesn't have access to the Batcave. She doesn't have access to his money, his prototypes. Lucius Fox isn't around the corner making things for her. So she's had to be resourceful. And Carrie Kelly as a character is very utilitarian. She's not wearing something just to wear it. She's wearing it because she needs to wear it. There is function and formality to every single piece on her. Her gauntlets, they're not just protective. They have a compass. There's a GPS locator. There's all these little different gadgets on her gauntlets. Her bandolier. Okay, she has the batarangs. And Navia she's a teeny tiny little pinky of a human, and she's got these giant batarangs that she needs to keep both accessible but also on her person, and they go across her chest. So it was developing, okay, how does she wear the batarangs so that she has easy access for throwing them, but also it still looks cool, but the functionality of it is coming first. So it was thinking of what all does she need on her right away? What does she need to fight crime? And for Carrie, it changes episode to episode. She's fighting the Talon one minute, and then she's taking down the mutant gang in another moment. And those are 2 different kind of skill sets needed there, and also a lot of different weapons needed. So her costume is adaptable. You see D-rings on her so that she can clip different weapons to her. She has little pouches. I mean, pockets, people. She's got pockets. It's helpful. She's got pockets all down her pants. She has everything that she needs to, save Gotham at reach. And it's also still Robin at the same time. So we've got the red hoodie, which is so cool and wonderful. And then the extra fun thing that I love about her, that you'll see as the season goes, her costume just in little ways evolves, but it also might take on the properties of one of the other knights that she's working with. Might, give her an upgrade here or there. So I'm excited for you guys to see what that is.
Nice. Yeah, we love pockets. when we can have pockets. When you wear dresses, yes, pockets, love it.
I have pockets.
Yes.
I love pockets.
So James, you've held several positions on Westworld, including art director, set designer, and concept artist. Can you give our audience an insight into what that entailed for a series as grand as Westworld?
So I started on Westworld as an art director. I like to say I was the art director of dirt. So it was any set that was in the middle of nowhere. All the Western sets where there's horses riding through, I would have to go at 3 a.m. and make sure there was no cactuses with our greens team that would hurt the horses, and you have to be there really early. So I was doing all of those amazing vistas. I got to go to Utah, do all this incredible stuff. And as an art director, like a locations art director, you're sort of a one-person show. You're kind of on your own. The art department is back in LA somewhere. And it's a lot of like sort of scrappy resourcefulness. And then the second season, I came back and I was actually allowed to stay here, and I was art director of the stages at that point. So then that's all the building scenery. You're dealing with construction crews. It's a lot more. There's a lot more oversight. There's a lot more people on you about things looking right, but it's also sort of more prestigious because it's the sort of iconic scenery that you're building and developing. And then sort of by the end of that season, our production designer left to do another show. We still had 2 episodes left. So the supervising art director bumped to production design, and then I bumped to supervise, which, it's a very different job. It's a lot more managerial. You're dealing with staffing, and then therefore also sort of there's, dealing with HR things. If somebody has an issue, you're everybody's therapist. It's like, it can be not a very creative role, but it's a very important role. So third season I came back, I was like, you know what, I don't want to art direct anymore. But if you want me on the show, I'll come back and I'll do concept work and I'll do set design. And I was going to say the nice thing about all of our departments, I think, is that they become kind of like your second family. And there's always, if you do a good job and people like you, they'll have you back however they can have you back. And I leveraged that to then just do amazing concept work and set design, and had a great time. So the 4th season, this last season that came out, like the Big White Host labs, a lot of the machinery and stuff, I got to like really get into a lot more of the creative design process of that, working right with the production designer, John Carlos, who I work with all the time, and held him hostage about having me back on the show. But it's just a great family. It's a great guild of artisans who all kind of bring each other up. And if you're not a jerk, they'll have you back.
Exactly.
That's my advice. Don't be a jerk.
Sweet.
Exactly. Now we're nearing the end of our panel, so I just have to ask each of you, in a sentence or 2, what advice would you give to people looking to do what you do or trying to break into the industry?
Oh boy, in a sentence or 2. Perseverance, and be ready for long days.
That's true, yeah.
Just being real.
I'd say don't listen to anyone. Just don't do it. There's a little voice inside that says, I can do this, that I want this. And then there's another voice that might say something else, but just work on making that small voice louder. Mm-hmm. For anything you want to do, really.
Exactly, yeah.
How do I follow that? That's perfect.
Good luck.
You
Mine
got
is
something.
Costume design and working in the costume department is not glamorous, so just know that ahead of time. It's not all rhinestones and couture. And so I like to encourage people, if you want to get into costumes, try out theater, or find a local indie production for a student film or a short film, and get involved in that way to see if it is something you love and are passionate about. Because if you don't have passion for this, that won't get you through the 18-hour days that we have. So find what you're passionate about and go for it.
Real talk, 18-hour days. Real talk.
You have to have passion.
And weekends.
You gotta have it.
I guess I already said my first one, which is don't be a jerk. Generally, if you're amicable and want to help, people see that. But the other one, just kind of piggyback off of that, is I would say like start small. Like if you think you might want to be a production designer, like find some musicians, see if they need a music video, just make some stuff, and like just see how it feels. Start small. Maybe then go and try and be a PA on something, which is usually, a good start, and then just work your way up.
And I'd just say, roll with everything. Don't take it too seriously. Sometimes things seem really, really dire when you're like in the middle of production. It's try to have fun. Realize that like everybody's trying to figure it out too, and just. Yeah, I don't know. I don't know. I had a lot of things running through my head, but I didn't prepare for that one.
Yeah, just roll with it.
Oh, and never think that you're like you've learned everything. Like you're always learning.
Yeah. Oh, yeah.
Anytime you think like, oh, well, this is how production runs.
Yes.
That's how that production ran.
Yeah.
This one is different, and this is how it's. Yeah. So just. Yeah, rolling with it.
Yeah.
Be flexible.
Roll with it, be flexible.
Definitely all very good advice. But that is the end of our panel today. That's all the time we have. Thank you guys. Thank you to our panelists, Rebecca, Justi, Jennifer, James, and Carrie for being here with us today to discuss their stunning work. Also, thank you to Impact 24 and WonderCon for putting this wonderful panel on, and be sure to follow them at Impact 24 PR and the rest of our panelists on social media. We'll see you guys next time.